So, have you ever actually stopped to wonder how the world's best companies seemingly predict the future? How they somehow manage to have the exact product you want, sitting on the exact shelf you're looking at right when you need it? Well, it's not magic. It's the incredibly high-stakes game of predicting consumer demand. If you get it right, your business scales effortlessly. But if you get it wrong, you're either drowning in a sea of unsold inventory or you're losing frustrated customers to stockouts.
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're totally geeking out on mastering the blueprint for inventory and efficient scaling. We're going to dive deep into demand forecasting, specifically looking at how the absolute top operations out there blend quantitative techniques, qualitative insights, and supply chain integration to literally see around corners. Okay, let's jump right in. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The forecasting objective. 2. The science of quantitative methods. 3. The art of qualitative insights. 4. Supply chain integration. And finally, 5. Real-world business impact. Section 1. The forecasting objective. Okay, so the ultimate goal here is absolutely crucial. We want to perfectly align our supply with future customer demand. And to pull that off, we actually rely on two wildly different schools of thought that we have to somehow bring together. On one side, we have quantitative methods. This is the science, right? It's completely objective, it relies heavily on historical sales data, and it's built on these really rigid mathematical models. But then, on the flip side, we have qualitative insights. This is the art. It's subjective, leaning into human judgment and on-the-ground market intelligence. We're going to explore both of these, but let's start with the hard numbers. Section 2, the science, quantitative methods. We'll start peeling the onion here with the two most basic concepts in the toolkit. First up is the naive forecasting method, and honestly, it's exactly what it sounds like. It just assumes that demand in the next period will exactly equal your actual demand from the most recent period. So if you sold 500 units in July, boom, your August forecast is simply 500 units. It's super simple and really only best for highly stable environments. Next is the simple moving average, or SMA. This one averages actual demand across the most recent periods just to smooth out any of those short-term random fluctuations. So say you sold 400 in May, 450 in June, and 500 in July. You just average those three together to get a nice, smooth 450-unit forecast for August. But what if recent trends are actually way more important than the older ones? That's where we add a cool layer of complexity with the weighted moving average. Instead of treating every single past month equally, we assign heavier weights to the most recent periods. Why? Because recent customer behavior is almost always a better predictor of immediate future demand. Let's walk through a practical example. Say we want to forecast August, so we give a massive 50% weight to July's 500 units, maybe 30% to June, and only 20% to May. You do the math there, and suddenly our forecast becomes 465 units. It dynamically pulls the forecast closer to our most recent sales spike. Now let's see how this builds into an even smarter model, the exponential smoothing method. I know, the formula can look a little intimidating at first glance, but it's honestly brilliant for one very specific reason. It requires minimal data storage. You literally do not need a massive database of historical sales to use it. You only need three things: your previous forecast, your actual demand, and a smoothing constant that we call alpha. So, if your previous forecast was 1,000 units, but your actual demand came in at 1,200 and your alpha set at 0.20, you just plug those numbers in. Your new forecast automatically adjusts to 1,040 units. A high alpha reacts really fast to recent changes, while a low alpha is going to give you a smoother, much more conservative forecast. But here's the catch. Math alone cannot predict the calendar, and this is where we tackle the single biggest hurdle in retail: seasonality. We do this using seasonal index adjustments, which basically represent how much a specific period deviates from your normal average. Imagine a typical retail scenario. If your average quarterly demand is 10,000 units, but you know your Q4 holiday average always spikes to 14,000 units, well, your seasonal index is 1.40. That means you've got a 40% surge in Q4. So if your baseline annual trend projects, say, 12,000 units for an upcoming quarter, you literally just multiply it by that 1.40 index, and bam, you get a highly accurate 16,800 unit final forecast. Of course, all of this forecasting is kind of useless if we can't measure how wrong we were, right? So this is how we neatly categorize and track forecast accuracy. First up is MAD, or mean absolute deviation. Managers absolutely love this one because it tells you your average error in actual absolute units. But then we have MSE, or mean squared error. By squaring the differences, this metric heavily penalizes massive outlier mistakes. If your forecast is just consistently off by a tiny bit, MSE is pretty forgiving. But if you're suddenly off by a million units, MSC is going to sound a massive alarm. Finally, we have MAPE, which just gives us our error as a neat, super easily comparable percentage. Section 3, the art, qualitative insights. Now, we have to talk about the flip side, because no matter how brilliant your math is, pure data models totally crash and burn during structural market shifts. I mean, think about it. If a global pandemic hits or a massive new competitor just enters the space, your historical data is pretty much useless. That is exactly where qualitative insights come into play. We rely on 3 primary techniques here. Executive judgment gathers high-level opinions from leadership across sales, finance, and operations. Salesforce Composite aggregates estimates straight from the reps on the ground, the ones who are actually talking to the buyers every day. And market research uses direct surveys and focus groups to test upcoming product demand before it ever even hits a shelf. But here's a totally fair question. How do you get all these super smart experts to actually agree without the loudest voice in the room just taking over the whole conversation? Well, you use the Delphi method. It's this fascinating 4-step process. First, you select a panel of internal and external experts, and you keep them anonymous. Second, they all submit their own independent forecasts through a questionnaire. Third, a facilitator summarizes all those results and circulates the data right back to the group. And finally, you just repeat these rounds over and over until the expert estimates converge into a final consensus. It completely removes ego and bias, leaving you with only pure, refined human intelligence. Okay. So what happens when we smash the science and the art together? We get what's called the hybrid forecasting model. Let's walk through a practical overlay example. The quantitative math, like our exponential smoothing baseline from earlier, tells us we need 10,000 units. But wait, executive judgment steps in and says, hey, we have a major marketing promo coming up, so we add 2,000 units. However, our Salesforce intelligence warns us, actually, a key competitor just dropped their prices, so we subtract 1,000 units. Our final, perfectly integrated forecast, 11,000 units. This right here, this is where the magic really happens. Section 4, supply chain integration. Now, to really grasp why deploying these perfectly blended forecasts matters so much, we have to talk about a total supply chain nightmare known as the bullwhip effect. The crucial thing to understand is this. Small variations in customer demand at the retail level trigger massively amplified, totally distorted order fluctuations upstream. A tiny bump in store sales causes the retailer to panic and overorder from the distributor. Then the distributor overorders from the manufacturer, who in turn starts hoarding raw materials. Throw in some order batching and price discounting, and you've got absolute chaos. The ultimate cure for all this? Shared point-of-sale data visibility and tight collaborative forecasting partnerships. Companies achieve this alignment through a highly structured 4-step playbook called Sales and Operations Planning, or S&OP. Step 1 is data gathering. Literally just collecting the actual sales and market data. Step 2 is demand planning, where you develop that unconstrained baseline forecast we were just geeking out about. Step 3 is supply planning. This is where you look at cold, hard reality. What are our actual manufacturing, storage, and material constraints? And finally, step 4 is executive S&OP, where leadership steps in, finalizes the operational plan, and reconciles any financial gaps. It's how raw actuals transform into a unified battle plan.
Section 5, real-world business impact.
All right. We've done the math, we've consulted the human experts, and we've aligned the chain. So what's the result? Let's talk real numbers. 35%. That is the massive reduction in out-of-stock events achieved by a fast-moving consumer goods company. Just by implementing this collaborative forecasting with their partners during peak seasons, they managed to keep their products on the shelves 35% more often right when it mattered the most. How about 22%? That is the holding cost savings for a major retailer that used this exact hybrid model we discussed today. Because they actually trusted their integrated forecast, they were able to safely decrease their excess safety stock across all their regional fulfillment centers. And as we know, less inventory just sitting around gathering dust in warehouses means way less money burned on holding costs. And finally, 18%. This is the improvement in forecast accuracy, specifically measured in that MAPE metric we covered, achieved by a global electronics manufacturer. How did they do it? By perfectly marrying advanced machine learning algorithms with intelligence pulled directly from their Salesforce on the ground. They literally combined the cold data with human intuition to enhance their 90-day accuracy by nearly a fifth. So, if you only remember one thing from this whole explainer, let it be this. Supply chain excellence is only unlocked when the objective science perfectly meets the subjective art. Integrated demand forecasting is exactly what bridges analytical rigor with strategic human insights. You literally cannot have one without the other in today's insanely volatile market.
The frameworks are all there. The math is completely proven. The qualitative techniques are highly structured and ready to go. The only question left is for you. How will you blend cold data and human intuition to shape the future of your own supply chain operations? Thank you so much for watching, and start forecasting your future today.